When was the last time you really stopped and looked at a work of historical portraiture? Maybe it was during a museum visit, or perhaps it was in a book. Either way, these days it seems like it's getting increasingly harder and harder to find time to really stop and look. It feels like a luxury. But today I'm here to make the argument that stopping to look at works of historical portraiture can bridge the past and the present and shed light on universal concerns that are just as relevant now as they were more than 200 years ago. My argument is illustrated by the two paintings you see before you here. Both of these are in the collection of the museum that I work for and are currently on view side by side just across the square. On the right, we have Dr. Noble Wimberly Jones. Dr. Jones was born in England and immigrated to Georgia in 1733 when he was a young boy of about 10 years old. He and his family were among the very first European colonists to settle in the Savannah area. His father was Noble Jones, who established what would become known as Wormslow Plantation, part of which is still in the hands to his descendants to this day. Dr. Jones was a practicing physician, but he was really best known for his work as a politician in the years leading up to and encompassing the American Revolution. He was a prominent leader of the Georgia Whig Party, which was the driving force in Georgia for independence for America from British rule. He served after the war as a delegate to the Continental Congress and enjoyed a long and productive career. So why are we looking at him? He was painted around 1804, near the end of his long life and his productive career. He was certainly aware of how this painting would allow him to be remembered. Looking at this portrait, we see that there's very little ornamentation or detail in the portrait, and that puts him in stark contrast to the gentleman on the left. He is Sir James Wright, who was the third and final royal governor of the British colony of Georgia. He was born in South Carolina to English parents, and to the very end remained loyal to the British crown. In fact, he was such a strong advocate for the British crown, and Dr. Jones was so strong in opposition to British rule that the two men frequently came head-to-head during Dr. Jones's service in the colonial Georgia legislature. And he was such a formidable rival that each time Dr. Jones was elected as Speaker of the Georgia Commons House of Assembly, Sir James would just dissolve the House altogether rather than going toe-to-toe with this very formidable rival. So the contrast between these two paintings is great. We can look at the very simple attire of Dr. Jones. He wears a plain black coat with that nice stiff collar. He has that white gathered collar of his shirt at his neck, but there's no ornamentation at all. Sir James, on the other hand, has a very elaborate coat, this beautifully painted lace shirt and collar, and the luxury of this scene is indicated even further by the luxurious red curtain in the background. Sir James was painted during one of his many visits to London, and the style in which he is painted has its roots in English court portraiture of the 17th century. So to summarize that style, the grander, the more opulent, the more extravagant, the better. In addition to the elaborate coat and backdrop, Sir James is indicating his status and his importance with his lofty expression. He gazes into the distance. He does not deign to meet our eye. And it looks like he's concerned with these important ideas that we little people couldn't possibly understand. And in case you can't determine from his lofty expression, beautiful, opulent, luxurious setting in the background, and his expensive attire, that Sir James is somebody very important, the artist has made it even easier for us by giving him this important-looking pile of documents, and going so far as to inscribe on the document he holds in his hand, "For the Governor of Georgia." So in contrast to all this pomp and circumstance with Sir James is Dr. Jones. As I mentioned before, his attire, simple. His background, nondescript. It doesn't offer any overt clues about his setting, and it certainly doesn't make direct associations with his wealth and status like Sir James's setting does. What does stand out about Dr. Jones's portrait is his forthright gaze. He meets the viewer's eye with intelligence, with authenticity, and with confidence. Another striking attribute of this painting is the shadow in the background that delineates Dr. Jones's profile. Now, this is not an accident, and it's not something that was limited to this portrait alone. In fact, at this point in history, after the American Revolution, it was very popular to distribute profiles of our new country's leaders. This was done to create associations between our leaders and those of the Roman Republic, whose profiles were very frequently featured on ancient Roman coins and medals. So the artists were creating a history by association between our brand new republic and the oldest, most long-lasting republic in human history. Now, despite these differences in style of the two portraits, they're both expressions of power, and they're both indicative of who held power during the turn of the 19th century, both wealthy, land-owning, white men of Anglo-Saxon descent. But they demonstrate their power in very different means. One, by tying himself consciously to the traditions of British and European court portraiture, and the other by casting off the elaborate trappings of court painting and instead aligning himself with the visual language of the Roman Republic. Now, for both of these men, the images you see right now are the best known images of them that exist today. In fact, for Sir James, this is the only known portrait of him that exists at all. So imagine that. Even these wealthy, powerful men only had 1 or 2 opportunities to be visually remembered for posterity. And ordinary people at that time would never have had the chance to have their portrait painted by a professionally trained artist. And much would change through the rise of technology. Over the ensuing decades and centuries, we saw in the 19th century the rise of photography, which democratized the art of portrait making further. And then in the 20th century, the rise of digital photography, which brings us to where we are today, where we have this near miracle of having a tiny device in our pockets that can capture and share dozens of portraits, although today we call them selfies, in just a matter of seconds and share them around the world with limitless numbers of people. You know, the world we inhabit today looks very different in so many ways from the world inhabited by Sir James and Dr. Jones more than 200 years ago. But I think we can all still relate to their impulse to control the way they were portrayed to the world. They used these visual images to make statements about their political leanings, their beliefs, their values, even the composition of their character. Today, these concerns still drive us. When we make decisions about which photos of ourselves to take, which ones to share, and how to share them, we're participating in a process that's very similar and shows just how universal this question is of how to best visually portray our self-identity. So I would ask you, the next time you are sharing your own photographs or you're consuming photographs shared by other people, take a moment to stop and think, what are the values, the attributes, and the beliefs that the image maker is trying to express with this image? Like our predecessors, we continue to grapple with the question of how to best visually represent our American identities. Thank you.